Introduction to Oga-Make's story. The author of this story is a Navajo Indian who shares a tribal secret he learned from the Paiute Indians living in California's Mojave Desert. This Native American, called Oga-Make, shares his story in thanks for an article about the Navajo that appeared in spring 1948 in a magazine discussing the mysterious signs or fires in the sky that were causing a lot of confusion and debate that year and afterward. The earlier article about the Navajo Nation talked about the hardships the tribe faced during previous winters and urged readers to send supplies to help them through the upcoming winter of 1948 to 1949, which many people did. In appreciation for this support, Oga-Make tells a legend about the secret history of the Americas that might have happened thousands of years before white settlers arrived. Most of you reading this are probably white individuals who trace your roots back just a century or two to Europe. You probably think of flying saucers or mystery ships as something new and typical of the 20th century. But if you were a Native American with a background that's been tied to this land for thousands of years, you'd know that's not the case. You'd understand that your ancestors roamed these mountains and prairies for generations and saw these ships long ago, passing down the stories in the legends that make up your people's unwritten history. Don't believe it? That's understandable. But because of your skepticism, many storytellers in my culture have kept quiet about this knowledge. But I've told them, with these ships appearing again, is it wise for us, the older generation, to keep this information to ourselves? So I've talked to some wise folks among my people, and if you're interested, I'll share what they said. Picture this. It's dusk in a place called Death Valley, a name given by white settlers. I've just shared tobacco with the old chief of the Paiutes, who sits across a small fire from me, sprinkling cornmeal into the flames. He looked ancient as he sat there smoking his pipe, but his eyes were sharp, as if they could look back into history. His people held the Inyo, Panamint, and Death Valleys for ages before the white man arrived. We're in the valley that's known as Death Valley to the white man, but the Paiutes call it Tomesha, or the Flaming Land. As I face east, the funerals, mountains that form the eastern wall of Death Valley, are wrapped in purple-blue colors at their bases, with their peaks glowing bright red. Behind me, the Panamints rise like a massive wall, dark against the setting sun. The old Paiute took a long drag from my tobacco before he gently blew the smoke in all four directions. Then he spoke up. So, you want to know if we heard about those great silver airships back when the white man brought his wagon trains into this land? Yeah, grandfather, I'm looking for answers. In my culture, calling someone grandfather shows the highest respect you can offer. Well, we, the Paiute Nation, have known about these ships for ages. We also think we know a thing or two about the folks who fly them. They're called the Hav-musuvs. Who are the Hav-musuvs? They're from the Panamint Mountains, and they've been around as long as Tomesha has. He chuckled a bit at my confusion. You don't get it? Of course not. You're not a Paiute. Just listen, and I'll take you back through the mists of time. When the world was still young, this valley that's now a dry desert used to be a lush harbor with a big blue lake stretching from up those mountains all the way to the Gulf of California. The story goes that the Hav-musuvs came here in huge rowing boats. They found some massive caves in the Panamints and built one of their cities inside. Back then, California was really an island, just like the locals told the Spanish, and they'd even marked it that way on their maps. In their hidden city, the Hav-musuvs ruled the waters with their quick rowing boats, trading with distant people, and bringing back all sorts of strange stuff to the big docks that are still said to be in those caves. But as centuries went by, the climate started to change. The water in the lake dried up until there was no route to the sea anymore. First, the southern mountains blocked the way, but over time, the lake shrank until all that was left was a crust of dry ground. The desert took over, and the fire god began to walk across Tomesha, known as the Flaming Land. When the Hav-musuvs could no longer use their big rowing boats, they started thinking about other ways to explore beyond. That's probably when they switched to flying canoes. At first, these shiny ships with wings were small. They moved with a gentle whirring sound and dipped through the air like an eagle. As the centuries passed, more changes came. Tribe after tribe swept through the land, battling to claim it for a time, and then fading away like a sandstorm. Meanwhile, the Hav-musuvs stayed tucked away in their mountain city, living peacefully in their caves, far from all that chaos. Sometimes you could spot them in the distance, either in their flying ships or riding these snowy white animals that helped them navigate the cliffs. We haven't seen those unique animals anywhere else. For the Hav-musuvs, the changing times brought only bigger and quieter ships. Have you ever seen a Hav-musuv? No, but we have a ton of stories about them. There are reasons why we don't dig too deep into it. Reasons? Yeah, these strange people have weapons. One of them is a small tube that gives you a prickly feeling, kind of like getting hit with cactus needles. You can't move for hours, and during that time, the mysterious people disappear up the cliffs. The other weapon is deadly. It's a long, shiny tube. When it's pointed at you, it means death comes right away. What about these people? What do they look like, and how do they dress? They're really beautiful. Their skin has this golden tint, and they wear a headband to keep their long, dark hair back. They always dress in a fine white garment wrapped around them and draped over one shoulder. They wear light sandals on their feet. His voice faded into a puff of smoke. The purple shadows climbing the walls of the funerals swirled like waves on a ghostly lake. The old man seemed to get lost in thought, but I had one more question. Has any Paiute ever talked to a Hav-musuv? Or were the Paiutes around when the big rowing ships first showed up? For a bit, I wondered if he even heard me. As is our way, I just waited patiently for an answer. He went through the ritual of breathing in smoke to the 4 directions, and then he continued softly. Once, not too long ago, but many generations before the Spanish came, a Paiute chief lost his bride to a sudden death. In his deep grief, he thought about the Hav-musuvs and their long tube of death. He wanted to join her, so he said goodbye to his grieving people and set off to find the Hav-musuvs. They didn't show up until the chief began to climb the almost impossible Panamints. Then, a man in white suddenly appeared in front of him with the long tube and gestured for him to go back. The chief signaled that he wanted to die and kept going. The man in white let out a long, whistling sound, and more Hav-musuvs showed up. They spoke to each other in some strange language and looked at the chief thoughtfully. Finally, they signaled to him, making him understand they would take him with them. Weeks later, after his people had mourned him as dead, the Paiute chief returned to his camp. He had been in the giant underground valley of the Hav-musuvs, where bright white lights burned day and night, never going out or needing fuel, lighting up an ancient city of marble beauty. There, he picked up their language and history, and he shared the language and legends of the Paiutes in return. He said he would have loved to stay there forever, enjoying their peaceful and beautiful life. But they told him to go back and use his new knowledge for his people. Do you believe the story about the chief? I'm not sure. When a guy gets lost in Tomesha and the fire god is walking over the salt crust, strange dreams flood his mind. No one can breathe the hot breath of the fire god and stay sane for long. You know, the Paiutes have thought about this. No one understands Tomesha's moods better than they do. You asked me about the legend of the flying ships. I've told you what the younger folks in the tribe don't know, since they've stopped listening to the old stories. Now, you want to know if I believe it. Here's my answer. Turn around and look at that wall of the Panamints. How many giant caverns could be hiding there, covered by the lights and shadows of the rocks? How many could open up, either outward or inward, and never be spotted behind the sharp peaks? How many ships could swoop down like an eagle from nowhere on summer nights when the furnace sands have blocked the valley from the white man's view? How many Hav-musuvs could live in peace, away from the noise of the white man's guns, in their tough-to-reach hideouts? This land has always held mysteries. Nothing can change that, not even the white man with his flying machines, because if they get too close to the wall of the Panamints, a sharp wind, like a flying arrow, could easily take off a wing. Tomesha keeps its secrets well, even in winter, but no one can uncover them when the fire god covers the passes with his hot breath. I have to answer your question with some doubt, though, because we're talking about a strange land. The white man doesn't know it as well as the Paiutes do, and we've always respected it. It's still the forbidden Tomesha, land of the flaming earth.